It is 7 o'clock, and I am going to call our work session to order. I'll turn things over to Mr. Mahoney.
Thank you. Good evening to all of you. Welcome to our small but mighty work session. We have three sets of presenters this evening. First, you'll get the opportunity to hear from Monica Boot, who is our new HR and Labor Relations Director. She comes to us with a long and distinguished career within that field. We're very fortunate to have her. We thought it would be good to make sure that you could put a face and name together with her and hear about some of the things she's working on as she's moving about her entree into city government. Next, Dr. Stoltz will come up and she will preview the itinerary for our hosting of the Tubigen delegation that'll be coming in September. They will be here for 6 days. We have been planning for seemingly 1 year, and we're very excited to host them. When she finishes that, she will talk to you a little bit about some of the grants that we are pursuing and the leveraging opportunities that those will afford us. So we're leveraging the millage that the community has chosen to give us. We're looking for other funds to expand the work, and Dr. Stoltz will talk about that. Not on the agenda, but I thought interesting and relevant to mention, at the same time we're hosting our sister city, we are not the primary host, but we will be involved in the visit from Chapel Hill to Ann Arbor. So they are sending 70 people here, and they're going to spend a couple of days. They have the majority of 2 city councils coming with them. They're pierced their quorum, if you will, so media will be traveling with them. There's a number of elected officials, university professionals, folks from city government departments. And when you think about all the work that we are doing and all the things that we feel like we still have to move towards, they are coming because they are impressed with how we're approaching affordable housing, downtown vitality, economic development, and climate action. And if you understand the significance of the triangle, they are internationally recognized for their intellectual property development. So to them, we are doing something right because we are the same size in terms of geography, but they only have 40% of the density of Ann Arbor. And they want to know, how did you do that? So some of us will be addressing them while they're here, and they're so excited they will even be doing live broadcasts back to Chapel Hill while they're in Ann Arbor. So I thought it would be good to put that out there. After Dr. Stoltz is finished, then Derek and Brett will come up. We're not finished with the comp plan by any means, but we're going to give you a status check on kind of what we're hearing, where we're at. And then they have one of their consultants that will be talking to you online. And then after that, you get some specifics as to what we're doing with our development process. We've talked a lot about it, but what are things that we're actually doing to make the process better for the users? And so you'll hear a little bit about that. And afterwards, we'll go home and hope the Olympics is still going because we're excited. Monica, come on up.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to take a few minutes to introduce myself. I know you have a busy agenda this evening, so I'll keep it relatively short. My name is Monica Boot, and I was born in Ann Arbor. Thank you. And I was raised in the local area. I followed both of my parents into public service. One worked for the city and one worked for the county. Both of my siblings worked for public sector as well. So I have 28 years of HR experience here in the local community, coming from the county and then most recently the ride. That was a really great experience. I began my HR career in the benefits area. Some of you may know former County Administrator Verna McDaniel. She was a great mentor, and I really appreciated the time that I was able to work with her. But I think the time starting in benefits really lays the foundation for the focus on employees and how you can best support them and make their experience a really great experience. And so my foundation is in the benefits area, and then I progressed through all of the different areas within HR. Some of my loves were the benefits. I really liked using technology and trying to have process improvement, so I went through a few different technology upgrades that allowed employees to be able to better utilize the services from an employee perspective. And then most recently, my focus and passion has really been in the employee engagement area. And employee engagement to me is more than just being satisfied as an employee. It's really being engaged and connected and valuing my colleagues and the people around me and the work that we do. And I think particularly after the last long couple years, the work environment has changed, recruiting has changed, retaining employees has changed. So I think employee engagement is probably one of the most critical areas, particularly trying to have more diversity and inclusion. I think that is really where oftentimes a public sector employer can really focus on gaining those employees and the employee engagement, rather than always compensation and benefits. We can't always lead the market in those areas. While we do a great job, and we're in the middle of doing a compensation study for our non-union staff, and I think that will be really interesting. But those are those foundations, but we can make the organization a great place to work based on culture and including different perspectives. And the more that we can do that, you build the culture, and that is where, particularly in my opinion, from a public sector employer, you're really going to get that tenure and diversity of thought and diversity of output. I think the employee experience directly relates to the customer experience, and the better that the employee experience is, the better outcomes that you have. So I've been really looking forward to meeting everybody here at the city. I think that there's a lot of similarities with the county, but it's also very different, and I've been super excited to learn from everybody that I've come in contact with this last month. The HR team is doing really well. I think we're starting to look at some long-term strategy, what we want to do for the organization, where there's some need, where there's some needs that haven't been met. So really looking at that compensation study, employee engagement, as well as performance management, and then the use of technology in HR to be able to engage employees. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boot. Does anyone have any questions for her while she's here? All right, thank you. Next up, we're going to have a presentation from Dr. Stoltz on our To Begin Sister City visit.
Next one, that one. Hello, City Council members. It's really great to see you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to share a little bit about our Sister City visit, which is coming up in 5.5 weeks, very, very fast. I just want to preface this by saying you are invited to anything and everything that you see on this agenda. So if something really jumps out at you, please come and let me know, and I'll make sure to get you a calendar invitation. Otherwise, I'll point out explicitly where we already plan to send you an invite for these fun festivities. So the way I'm going to do this is just walk through each of the daily agendas that we have structured, and then let me know if you have any questions, especially if you have ideas for things that we should be doing that we're not, or people you want to make sure are invited to any of these sessions. Sound good? Let's go. All right, so our sister city is joining us. They are bringing 6 folks, including elected leaders. The mayor, Lord Mayor Palmer, will be joining, as well as a few department heads. They'll be coming in on the 15th, which is a Sunday. I'll be picking them up at the airport, bringing them in. They're staying downtown for the majority of their stay at the Marriott. We'll settle them in. Rest assured, we have welcome packets. We're going to make sure they have a wonderful first transition in. And then on Sunday night, we have an optional dinner. They're likely going to be quite tired with time change. So we'll do something pretty low key. If you'd like to join us in welcoming folks, please do let me know. Otherwise, this first night is pretty relaxed. And then we go fast. So we jump in on Monday morning on the 16th. Each day is structured very similarly. So the morning, each day is thematically tied. I'll start there. And then in the morning, we have folks kind of in more of an informal roundtable where we'll be discussing what we're doing in a given area and its intersection with sustainability. We also each day have some sort of physical activity that we're doing, walking tours, getting out in the river, and you'll see that here. And then in the evenings, we have some sort of a reception or celebration of something about what the uniqueness of Ann Arbor, what makes us great, it was something we're really kind of proud of. If it's not clear, thematically, they are coming because of our work on climate action, so everything is going to have that tie in. Monday, we're focusing on transportation and land use. So in this session, we've got folks who are going to sit down and talk to them about what we're doing in terms of Vision Zero, our expansion of bike lanes, our walking and biking infrastructure more broadly. Then we're going to take them out on a bike tour. So they're actually going to go out and they're going to ride bikes and they're going to see that infrastructure in action. They have a private tour of Zingerman's. So Roger and team are going to show them around. They're also doing a special lunch at Zingerman's because, of course, that's iconic. And you may know we have a CTN show around sustainability called Greenlight. There will be a special recording of Greenlight with the two mayors talking about their shared commitments, kind of bantering back and forth, a little friendly competition around our sustainability work. In the evening, we get to shine a light on our very own Jackie Boudry and our clerk's office. We're doing a special session at UMA. UMA's closed, but it's going to be open for us. We're going to invite the regents from the university, leadership of the university, all of you will be invited, and Jackie's going to be the star, talking about democracy in action, because that's very important to all of the work that we do. So we're going to have a little celebration. Sadly, you all, if you join us, have to leave to come to a council meeting, but that's okay because we're going to follow you. And there will be a proclamation recognizing the relationship between our sister city that evening. So kind of a nice transition day in. On the 17th, that Tuesday, the focus is on the circular economy. They were very interested in learning more about our materials management process. So we're going to be heading down to Wheeler. We've got Sarah Mason and team ready to talk about what we're doing around circularity, both traditional management of compost and recycling, but even more, our partnership on returnable container programs, our swap day work, what we're trying to do to really expand from an extractive economy to much more of that regenerative economy. They'll then do a tour of the MRF. We have lunch at Bicentennial Park, where we actually have some of our community partners coming in. I believe this day it's El Harissa. So staff from El Harissa are going to cater lunch, and then they're going to talk about the work they're doing with us on sustainable food. If folks do not know, El Harissa's entire menu, if you walk in, is labeled like a stoplight. Everything green has a low carbon footprint. Everything red has a high carbon footprint. So we're going to talk about how that was created and how we help educate people about their food choices. They also participate with us on a number of other events. Following lunch and that wonderful conversation, pretty relaxed, we're going to head over to Bryant to the community center. We're going to do a tour of that resilience hub. We're going to talk about the relationship with CAN. Derek Miller will be on site. And then we're going to do a walking tour with the residents to talk about our work to make that America's first carbon neutral neighborhood. So really kind of a lived experience. In the evening, we're doing a special dinner reception at Cobblestone Farm, and we've invited all of the A20 collaborators. So here, the intent is really to show that it takes a village, right? Sure, we're going to talk about what staff are doing, but we want to lean into our businesses, our nonprofits, our educational institutions, everyone who's stepping up to be part of this work. Oops. On Wednesday, it's Climate Day. So our team is going to center and talk to them about our programs like our home energy rebate, herd ordinance, the work that we're doing around sustainable food more broadly, but it'll be centered here at City Hall. We're then going over to the farmers market. So Wednesday, it's farmers market day. They'll have a special tour with the market manager. We'll actually pick up some snacks from the market. We may head over to the fire station and cook those. We're working on with the chief on that. Afternoon, Phyllis has opened the Detroit Street filling station. So they'll have lunch with the entire OSI team. And then we are taking them, thanks to the Huron River Watershed Council, out on a boating tour. So they're going to lead us. We also will have at this point a park dedication. We have a special bench that we purchased for Tübingen Park. The plaque is being designed right now. We'll invite the media out. You will all be invited as well. And again, you're welcome to join us out on the river. We will then come back, and in the evening, we have a special session at the library downtown in partnership with the library, where Lord Mayor Palmer from Tübingen is going to give an update on their work on climate action and what we can learn from it, as well as what we are inspiring in the work that they are doing. I just want to note too, we have, so our formal delegation from the municipal government is 6 folks coming in, and that's what I'm really talking about. But they are also bringing a delegation of residents. So I think they have upwards of 18 folk who are also going to be joining us. Yes. So they come in on Wednesday, and they're going to meet us at the library. So that's an opportunity. Certainly the mayor will be the star of that show, but the residents will also be there to interact with members of the public. This is a public event. We'd really appreciate your help in getting the word out about it. We want to show that Ann Arbor really cares about this topic. Thursday, we're heading down to talk about affordable housing and sustainability and the intersection of that work and the challenges of that intersection and how we're navigating it. So Jen Hall is going to be leading them on a discussion and then a tour of the Housing Commission site. The afternoon, thanks to collaboration with the University of Michigan, we have a special tour of M-City for the official delegation and the resident delegation. So we're combining for the afternoon. We also are going to go check out the Robotics Center. They have a special tour with the director there, and lunch being catered kind of on North Campus broadly. Then in the evening, we're going to stick with the university. We have the botanical gardens. If any of you have been to the Strahl Bale House, it's stunning, it's beautiful, it's all local, and that's where we're going to have a public reception for folks to come, meet the delegation, interact. We hope you can join us for that too. At this point, everyone's probably pretty tired, so Friday for us is an actual transition. I think you probably know we have a lot of football games going on in the fall, and the hotel rates got really, really expensive for Friday night. So we're transitioning to homestays at this point. If you know of anyone in the community who would like to offer a single night in their home, this is very customary in German culture for people to stay in homes. It may feel a little foreign to us, but this is very normal. We are transitioning the team into homestays where they can kind of be more comfortable and immersive in a place. And then they have a special reception with Spark. Following that, they have an afternoon free to explore, and then it's Green Fair. So we're going to invite them downtown to see what it looks like when the community is sort of all together in a spot, and they can see all of those collaborators and all of those different activities in one set place. They are departing on Saturday, but they first get to go to a tailgate if they want to, and then they'll be taking off after. The resident delegation, however, is then going to move on to Chicago, so they're going to stay. So the official delegation is going to go back home, but the residents will stick around. So that's our formal itinerary. Again, you are welcome to join us for any element of this. There's a much more detailed itinerary that's going to tell you exactly where we'll be. Otherwise, I plan to send you invitations to all the evening receptions. Please join us for whatever makes sense in your schedule. We really want to show them that we're glad they're here, we want to learn from them, and that truly we're united in this work. Questions, concerns, heartburn? No? All right. While we pivot over to the next topic, I wanted to share that we are going to invite the Chapel Hill delegation to join us at the reception at UMA as well, because we think that would be a sort of nice intersection. And 70 people is no joke, so that'll be fun. Yeah, Jackie, you're going to have an audience. All right, pivoting topics very quickly. Wanted to share a little bit about some of the fundraising that we're working on in OSI. And I want to give Milton a lot of credit for this. He has very much kept us focused on the federal reality that we're in right now. The landscape is changing quite a lot. And it's not clear what's going to be available in the future. But what is clear is what funding resources are available today. So we've been pretty intentional in OSI about thinking in terms of what our strategic needs are and what federal grants or state grants might be available we should pursue, and not taking for granted that they'll be available next year. So the way I structured this, I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. I just wanted to do a little highlight on some of the grants we have already received, what we're working on right now in real time, and then what are kind of horizon priority issues for us. So in terms of the grants that we have secured, the vast majority of these have been leveraging the Community Climate Action Village. So we just won a grant that you're going to see come before you soon for a refrigerant recycling program. It's a pretty small grant, it's about $130,000, but this is important because refrigerants are high, they have high global warming potential when they leak, and they leak all of the time. This is specifically for small businesses to transition their equipment over. You know, we won the geothermal planning grant in Bryant. You'll see in a minute we're prepping for the second phase of that grant. It's I have permission to tell you now, but you haven't seen this yet, nor has a press release gone out, but Congresswoman Dingell has said it, so I'll say it. We won a round 2 of the AmeriCorps program, and that is leveraging the Community Climate Action Village. That has been transformational for our ability to get out into the community, so you should see that grant agreement soon. You just saw on Thursday the Resilience Network. This was the EPA grant for the Resilience Hub infrastructure and that kind of interconnection between those hubs and the other programs emerging from it. We did win the SEMCOG LED lighting grant. That leverages the millage. The Safe Streets for All, I forgot to put on here. That also is the matches from the Community Climate Action Village for that particular grant. You're going to see at your next council meeting a U.S. Forestry Service grant that we won for a comprehensive tree canopy analysis, some tree plantings, especially in underserved areas, and the exploration of a tree what's the word I want to find? A nursery, that's the word. A nursery that we might be able to develop here for the entire county. It's sort of an exploration of if we can do that. I'm really excited about the prospect of a potential nursery to grow our own native and climate-smart plants. And then we did win a solar award, $2.5 million to expand solar at city facilities. And then we have a $5 million award that we got from the state of Michigan to do landfill solar projects. So not bad. These are all within the last 12 to 18 months that we've secured, and the vast majority of them are in the last 3 to 5. This is what makes me cry slightly. These are the grants we're actively working on at the moment. So we have 2 charging and fueling infrastructure grants. One is a repeat of one the city submitted. This is for about 50 chargers in Ann Arbor. This one is in, and we're waiting on news as to whether or not we've won that. We're also working with the county. They're the lead on a regional charging grant. We were able to submit 2. So we're providing a lot of the support in grant writing and the technical elements, but the county is the lead to expand that work. It doesn't matter if we can only do it in Ann Arbor. We need to grow our charging infrastructure broadly. And in that grant, it would add roughly 25 to 30 more chargers in the city. So if we land both of these, that's a pretty significant expansion of our charging infrastructure. By the end of this week, Jen Hall and I will submit a community change grant to the US EPA. This is to fully decarbonize 140 units of affordable housing. It's a partnership between the Housing Commission, Avalon, and our office. We are really excited about this particular grant, and fingers crossed that one materializes. And then this morning I talked to CAN, and turns out we're going to do another one. We're going to submit for Bryant work, and we might even do a third, focusing on the returnable container program. Okay. We also have a grant into the Michigan Public Service Commission to do solar and batteries on every single household in Bryant. We are a finalist. We'll know in September whether or not we won that. That is about $3.5 million if that one comes in. We have a DOE geothermal implementation grant. This is the one we're eligible for only because we won that first phase of planning for the Bryant project. This is a down select. This grant is due in September. Determinations on award will be in November. So it's a very quick turnaround. There are only 11 communities in the country that are eligible for this funding, so we're working really hard to land this grant, and this would be pretty game-changing to build a network geothermal system in Bryant. We're working with the University of Michigan on a DOE Connected Communities grant, roughly about $3 million for this grant, and I'm sorry, the geothermal grant is roughly about $10 million that we'll be exploring, again, matched from the millage. The Connected Communities grant is to do the hardware and the software for the second phase of the SEU, how the homes actually connect and how you manage that. It's a very specific grant opportunity that aligns really, really well with that call. I mentioned before the AmeriCorps award. We anticipate you actually have to apply for AmeriCorps awards in about 2 months for the next year, so we'll start working on that again. We're working with some of our partners in the trades and with community colleges such as WCC and local employers on a DOE Good Jobs and Clean Energy prize. This one's pretty exciting, due in January. And then we are in a DOE Solve It prize. And these last 2 are different. They're not grants, they really are prizes. So there aren't conditions associated with the funds. You apply to form a partnership, and then they give you money to continue that partnership. And then you create some sort of a plan, and they give you funds to implement that plan. And you have a lot of discretion. In the DOE Solve It prize, we are working with Community Action Network, and we've already won the prize, the first phase. Then there are 2 more phases, and only those eligible for the second phases are those who won the first phase, right? So it's sort of this like funnel that goes down. So we're working on the second phase for that particular prize. Our initial award was $40,000. The next phase is $100,000. And then if we make it through that phase, we're eligible for $300,000. And all of that goes to decarbonizing homes in Bryant. 100% is just about infrastructure improvements. And then to close out, the things that we're still seeking funding for or looking for opportunities to advance, we want to do a microgrid at Vets and Fire Station 3. This is a pretty vulnerable area of the city. There's some FEMA grant funding opportunities we've been pursuing here. We haven't been successful yet, but we'll keep trying. I am constantly looking for funding for the sustainable energy utility, and DOE has a lot of opportunities that are close. We haven't quite landed them yet. We'll keep working. The returnable container program is ready to scale. We just need to find some infrastructure dollars to make that happen. We have to figure out how to decarbonize our own buildings. That's very expensive to do. A lot of people don't pay for those kinds of programs, but we're going to keep our eyes on the prize and try to secure as much as we can to make that happen. Bryant is going really well, and I'll knock on wood, I think that we're going to have a successful, we're going to be able to say that we've successfully decarbonized a neighborhood. It's going to happen. I think there's enough momentum that I see that. Then what is the question? What neighborhood's next? And then what's after that? So we've started to work with Pittsfield Village to potentially be one of our second neighborhoods, but we have other neighborhoods who are also interested, so we want to figure out how we fundraise for that. And then lastly, we have to figure out how we support commercial and multifamily institutions with decarbonizing too. We've focused a lot on residential. That's absolutely appropriate. It's where most of the community climate action millage rebates and programs are going. That's where they're targeted. But it's time to expand to other sectors. So those are areas we're going to keep looking to see where we can unlock some additional funding, and we're excited to see if you have any ideas as well. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions? Councilmember Cornell.
I think I have two comments versus questions. I would love to see OSI, as you look at what communities are next, to focus on our affordable housing communities. I think that just feels like a great intersection of our values in Ann Arbor. And I am curious, as you look to build out infrastructure, if your office has plans on making some of the charging stations and whatnot part of our placemaking, so and part of our economic development efforts in terms of making them free for use during peak times or anything like that to draw people downtown who might use that as an excuse to charge their vehicle.
Yeah, it's great questions. So one of the things I didn't name is the partnership we have with the Housing Commission. One of our strategic goals is to decarbonize every unit of affordable housing in the city. Jen and I are running at lots of funding opportunities to do that. But we also have, I hesitate to call it this, it's the term of art is naturally occurring affordable housing. There's nothing natural about it. There's a reason it's priced the way it is. We need to figure out how to help those neighborhoods too. So I think if I am interpreting your comment right, it's both of those things. Yeah, that's great. We fully agree. Yeah. In terms of charging infrastructure and placemaking, it's an interesting question. What I can say is we've been thinking a lot about other design elements of the infrastructure. So not so much the free elements, because there is a cost to that electricity. We are putting requirements so that you can't charge more than that it is really only the cost of the electric at the time of charging. But we have thought about how we tie in local art to that infrastructure, how we make it beautiful, how we make it part of our place. And then, of course, I didn't mention this here, but you will eventually see from us, we are about to launch a program where we're offering discounted chargers and free chargers, actually, to commercial and multifamily sites to handle at-home charging for folks who live in apartment complexes, for example, where there's just not an incentive to install. And that might be launched as early as next week. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Stoltz. Next up, we will have a comprehensive plan update from Mr. Delacourt and Mr. Leonard.
Neither, actually. Good evening, Council. I'm Brett Leonard, the Planning Manager. Soon we should be joined by Stacy Chen of Interface Studio, who will be joining us via the miracle of technology. And we'll be presenting an update. As Administrator Dohoney indicated, we're midstream in our comprehensive plan process, but we thought it was a good opportunity to give you a snapshot of what we're hearing, some of the big picture goals that we have identified or themes that we've heard from people. I'm going to turn it over to Stacy, and then of course Stacy and I are happy to address any questions you have afterwards. And I see Stacy. Are you there? You're there.
Yes.
Take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you virtually. Sorry I'm not there in person, but I'm excited to share a bit of an update with you all. I'm going to share my screen. Turn this to a slideshow. All right. Can I get just a thumbs up or something if this is good? Okay, great. So in terms of the update, I'm going to walk you through three main pieces, just where we are in the process, a bit of a summary of the engagement we've done thus far, and then what are some of the emergent themes that we are hearing, and then finally where we're headed in next steps. So in our timeline, we are, as Brett mentioned, probably about halfway through, if not maybe a little bit more, here coming towards, the latter part of the summer. We have thus far conducted our inventory and initial outreach, what took the shape of online surveys that were launched earlier in the year, and then a series of public events that we had both downtown and in libraries across the city. And then we've also participated in a series of pop-up events over the course, not just the beginning of summer, but that's been happening over the course of several months. So that has been going on. And then we're going to start gearing up for some more targeted focus groups as we develop our vision and our strategies, which is where we are in the middle of right now. So a bit of an overview. Some of the engagement has been done online. So in terms of visitation, we've had over 19,000 views of the Comprehensive Plan website, which hosts information about the plan, all of our presentations and data and events, as well as some online activities are all to be found on this website. The survey that I mentioned earlier had over 3,000 participants. And so what we've heard through that process, as well as what we've heard through other engagements, are being rolled together into what I'll be sharing with you. And then finally, just over the course of the summer games were a pretty popular mode of entry to the comprehensive plan, and we had over 2,000 summer games badges. In addition, there have been one-on-one interviews with various government agencies, and we'll be circling back to some of these. And actually, there have also been some additional interviews we've been doing with commercial and developers and downtown organizations as part of that process. And here's just an example of some of the pop-up events. It's coming up to a new Green Fair in this next month, but that's where we really kick things off. It's been almost a year now since that started up, and then most recently the Summer Festival. And all of these are opportunities to have a dialogue. So we've been asking questions at the Green Fair, but also sharing information. I mean, not the Green Fair, at all of these pop-ups, and sharing information as well. And then in the Summer Festival, you can see here there's a bit of Lego designing that was happening in addition to our information and questions. And then, as I mentioned before, we had a series of public workshops. There were 7 events in total. This picture here is from the downtown library, but we had events at branch libraries as well. We had over 380 attendees, and then we also held a series of small group meetings at these events. And our next step is to take it out in what we're calling a meeting in a box, which is designed to house some of the informational materials and then also a series of exercises that leads participants through questions about how Ann Arbor should grow, what kind of values, should we be reinforcing, and how can we balance different priorities. So we have a series of worksheets and activities involved in this meeting in a box. And these can be distributed in a number of ways, including through community organizations, but we will also have Smith Group, who is on our team, to lead the engagement, to be going out into communities with this engagement tool to collect additional information. So there have been a lot of people that we've talked to, both online and through pop-ups and through the workshops, and Smith Group and our team at Interface have been sifting through a lot of information and a lot of comments, open-ended comments, and trying to start to understand, what is it that we're hearing? What are the emerging themes? So to do this, we've been taking all of this information, but also looking back at the existing plans. And also, one of the activities that we did was to take the values that council gave us, which were affordability, sustainability, and equity, and ask the public to help us define them. And so here, I'm not going to read through all of these, but here are some of the themes that have arisen. And you can see there definitely is a lot of overlap between the different sources. So from the existing plans that we've been looking at, to the way that the public has been defining the values put forth by council, and also to our more open-ended questions about the vision for the future of the city. So you can see that a lot of these sources are kind of coming upon similar themes here. And so we've been taking this information and trying to understand, okay, so how do we take these overarching values for Ann Arbor as council has given us? And these are some of the quotes, like direct quotes that came out of some of our work, and take that back to the community. So that's one of the steps that we've been doing, is taking what we've heard, bringing it back to the community, bringing it back to our steering committee, bringing it back to the planning commission, and saying, does this sound right? I think that there's very strong public support for these three values. What there is also is some conversation about, should there be a fourth value in addition to these three? We haven't landed on exactly what it is yet, and we're still workshopping it and talking it through with our steering committee, but it sounds like a fourth value could be something along the lines of celebrating like what makes Ann Arbor Ann Arbor. And that could play out in a lot of different ways. Some people talk about it in terms of, the character of the city, which may be something more physical, but some people talk about it in terms of the people, right? The people that make up the city, and the need for dynamic, fresh ideas and new people, constantly reinvigorating the city. So this idea of like a dynamic, vibrant, Ann Arbor quality is something that we're exploring right now as a potential fourth value to add to these. And then another thing that we've been doing with all of these themes we've been hearing is trying to think about what a vision statement might look like for this next plan, thinking about leading up to 2050. And we've come up with a working statement that's really very, very, very simple. On the one hand, A2 for all. And we feel like that really, in reading through everything that people have been writing about the values and their vision, the word all is really, really important. And the way we can see it playing out with the values is in these ways. And these are all, working statements, but starting to point us in a direction. So A2 for all, in terms of affordability, we believe that all people should have the opportunity to call Ann Arbor home and to thrive. Sustainability means being committed to integration of all systems, social, built, and natural, in order to create a resilient community. And finally, equity, in order to ensure access for services and amenities for all, in addition to, really focusing in on underserved communities. And then we are exploring the different goal areas through which this could be expressed. And for us at this stage is to start to hone in a little bit more with this working vision statement and to start to find some of the goals that can help us achieve this vision. And another thing we've been asking people is, how can we grow? And so one of the activities that we took out to the public through the series of workshop, pop-ups, and online activities was talking about, where can we build up a little bit in Ann Arbor? Understanding that we need housing, and given all the values that we want to be able to balance. So we gave folks a question, which is basically, help us figure out where it makes sense. And so we had different colored dots in order to signify where, you could build up a little bit, and we had examples of examples that are already in Ann Arbor, so for examples, the ADUs or duplexes, where you could build up a little bit more or moderately, and then, townhouses and things like that, and then where you could build up a lot, so that would be more multifamily. And so what we gleaned from this activity, along with some others, are what you see on the left-hand side here. So I think there was a sense among our participants that more types of housing are needed, more housing, but also more different types of housing. And there was a need for higher density. There was also a sense that, we have to connect these places. They have to be more walkable, which density would help. There was a desire for focusing on the riverfront and also thinking about expanding downtown as a good place for housing some of this density. And then thinking about affordable housing and particularly missing middle housing. So those housing types that I just mentioned, like duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, even townhouses, some of those types of housing that we don't see a lot of. I think a lot of people were mentioning how, there's single family houses with yards, and then you've got apartment buildings. And there's a lot of stuff in between that would be desirable. Preservation was a theme, better transit, getting around in different types of mobility options, and then thinking about small neighborhoods and neighborhood retail, small businesses and neighborhood retail. All of these were themes that came out of some of our work thus far. And what we started to do then is think about how could we hone into the question of density and get a little bit more specific. So we devised a series of what if questions. So what if we were going to build housing for, say, 50% of the commuters and their families, which would be approximately 35 to 40,000 households? What if we added housing to the single-family zoned areas up to 4 units? What if we maximize the residential development in TC1 districts or other commercially zoned areas and parking lots? And then finally, what if we created another downtown scaled hub somewhere else in the city? So for example, someplace like Briarwood. And we took these questions and workshopped them. One of the things that, that was interesting is a large number of participants were supportive of additional housing in single family areas, somewhere between 2 to 4 units. And ADUs are already, an example of having a 2-unit on a single family area. So that was one of the things that led us to say, okay, let's go with 4 and see what people say. So in this what if scenario building, we did ask people, first of all, what do we have to gain? And I think there was a strong understanding that this is good for economic development. This supports the growth of the University of Michigan, which has been a major source of growth for the city as a whole. It's good for tax revenue. It's good for the millage, for all of the things that we want to support in Ann Arbor. It's good for diversifying the housing types and also the people who could live here. It could bring more businesses and services, and make for a better quality of life. But we also wanted to ask people, what are some things that we need to keep in mind if we're going to add people, if we're going to add density to basically all neighborhoods. And so these are some of the things that people mentioned: making sure that public infrastructure investments and service delivery can keep up, understanding that there will be a change of character, at least in the short term, the transition term, making sure we're thinking about open spaces, trees, impermeable spaces, natural features, those kinds of things. And understanding that traffic congestion could get worse in the short term, that is something ideally in the long term, you'll have more people, more walkability, more potential transit use. But in the short term, it could be more congested. And then finally, there will be more rentals as well. And then when we talked about the what-if scenarios for TC1 districts, for commercial areas, some of the things that people said that were a gain are similar, right? We could have more walkable neighborhoods and better streetscape, economic diversification, and accessibility convenience for people who are living in these new developments or near these new developments, more nodes of density, and an opportunity for a different type of, should we say, if we were to create more hubs that were similar to downtown but had a different flavor, there was the thought that, it could be a very different kind of place that would be a little bit less student-centric, for example. But on the flip side, people did say, we need to keep in mind the existing small businesses and the affordable commercial space that exists in these commercially zoned areas now. And to be aware of what impact it might have on downtown's primacy and legibility. And then finally, how it might impact the character and the unique identity of Ann Arbor. So all of this information that we've been hearing have been helping us to think about, okay, where are we headed come fall when we start to think about some recommendations? So there are two main things that we are thinking about with regard to the growth scenarios. One being to create enough housing in order to stabilize prices, as affordability is one of the key pillars. And the second one is to create enough housing so that half or more of all commuters could live in the city if they choose. We had floated that idea of half in the beginning as a way to start that conversation, but interestingly, a lot of the people we talked to were like, well, why half? Why not more? Why aren't we thinking bigger? And that, this absorption or opening for having people live closer to where they work will probably have the greatest impact on some of the climate goals and the vehicle miles traveled reduction of anything else we do. So that was an important point made by many. So what we're looking at is to simplify and streamline the development process. We're looking at taking the existing zoning districts and making them a little bit easier to understand, but also making sure that we provide flexibility in these districts. And then finally, thinking about, as we're streamlining these districts, how we might manage the transitions between the districts so that while we are looking to grow, we are doing so in a way that is sensitive to neighborhood context. And the goal for us then is in the fall to be able to share some of these initial ideas with regard to these districts. And then finally, the next steps, we are looking to do some focus groups to dive a little bit deeper into some of the topic areas. We are continuing to do the pop-ups and introducing these meeting in a box. And then, as I mentioned, as we approach the fall, to work on refining the goals and start to develop some of the draft recommendations. And with that, I want to make sure that there's time for questions. Should I stop sharing the screen, or do you want me to keep it up in case you want to pop back to another slide?
If you want to pop back to another slide, you might as well keep it up, I guess, if there are questions. Are there questions from council? Councilmember Iyer.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments and a question. One, I'm absolutely thrilled to see that 75% of our workshop participants were supportive of 2 to 4 units in single-family areas. I think it doesn't really surprise me based on the conversations that I have with people in the community, but I do think that's something I want to highlight, and I'm really, really excited to see. The other comment that I'll make is just, I was excited to see the inclusion here of more small businesses and neighborhood retail options. And that is something that we're going to be talking about at our next meeting. Hat tip to Councilmember Song for doing the heavy lifting on this, but we are going to be bringing forth a resolution asking the Planning Commission to look at ACUs, accessory commercial units, and for those who aren't familiar with those, think granny flats where granny can sell some jam out, out of the space, or maybe there's a small cafe or bookstore or something in your local neighborhood, a third space where people can gather. So I'm really excited about that, and I think that that goes hand in hand with the work that's being done here. The one question I had was when we had our stakeholder engagement interviews, I had asked about trying to get some data and crunch some numbers to see where in the city and what types of housing stock we could reasonably see being torn down and having a duplex or a triplex built in its place. Do you remember that conversation? I think you were there. Sort of what's the threshold of the age or the condition, the general market value of the area, just to give people a sense, because I noted in here it talked about if we move in this direction, we'll see the character of our neighborhoods change. And I still want to make sure that we're being realistic when we're talking about that, and helping people understand that this is not something that's going to happen overnight, because so many of our houses are in good condition. Yeah. And we're probably not going to see a house that's in great condition being torn down so someone can build a duplex.
Absolutely. And I don't have all of the data at my fingertips, I'm afraid, but that is a point that we are very aware of. For example, the ADUs, I forget the exact number, but it's not a very large number of ADUs that have been built. We have been looking at what has been happening around, and you will see some, but we can pull together. Maybe it's easiest if we pull together some of that data in one place with regard to the housing and the changes and the transitions. We have also looked at what we're calling propensity to change in terms of demographic changes as well. Things are more likely to happen, as people start aging out into a different, lifestyle, a different need for housing, whether you're upsizing or downsizing. So taking a look at some of those demographic shifts as well. But I think your point is very important, and I think it's something that we have been saying, is that zoning is going to allow something to happen, but won't make it happen. And should it happen, it will take, we're looking at a 2050 horizon, and it will take time. It will take time. So when I did mention like the change of character, I think it's a very important public sentiment, and there may be places in the city that feel like they're changing quickly, but overall, I think it will be a rather slow. It generally is a slower process.
Yeah, and I would agree with everything that Stacy indicated. Just for some numbers, we first allowed accessory dwelling units in the city in 2016. We've made some modifications to that over the years. In the next presentation, I'll highlight a couple of those. But we've had about 50 accessory dwelling units realized in that time. So when we're talking about these changes, particularly to adding 2 to 4 residential units, that's really mindful in our conversation at the project team level, is that is going to be a very slow change and a relatively small part of some of those targets that we're talking about. If we're talking about 40,000 new households, or we're talking about enough housing development to stabilize prices, that's not going to be achieved in 2 and 4 unit chunks in neighborhoods. As Stacy said, we are allowing that that will be a relatively modest to small piece of that. But we've also, I do want to acknowledge, we've had a lot of conversation at the steering committee and the planning commission to an extent as well, that's part of that zoning framework that's going to come out of this, is finding the right balance of that scale to allow that to happen. But I do want to be clear, by doing that, there will be neighborhoods in the city that evolve over time. And that's okay. That's how we got to where we are now. And I think it's really important for us to specify that the goals that are important to us and find the right way that those are going to evolve, to continue to evolve.
Yeah, thank you. I want to just stress that I personally am super supportive of it, and I feel that it's a really important tool in the toolbox. But if we don't do it, I mean, we are seeing certain neighborhoods. I think Water Hill is the best example of a neighborhood that has gentrified beyond belief because we don't have this tool right now. And so this is going to allow us, folks, to have the option to build a duplex instead of a, $1 million plus mansion, and try and, kind of keep the neighborhood character the way that it has been. So anyway, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Councilmember Song.
The resolution coming forward will, if the ACU idea is already in the master or the comprehensive planning conversation. And I'm excited about the resolution because it'll be asking our city administrator to take a closer look and hopefully maybe prioritize it, because why should we wait for grandma's jam or beer, should she want to choose to make and sell beer in the neighborhood, right? And actually, the heavy lifting is now in the city attorney's office. So thank you, Attorney Coward, for taking a look at that. My question is around the expansion of downtown areas. So are we looking at additional TIF levying areas coming on board?
I don't know. So definitely when we were talking through our workshops, downtown was an area where we really focused in. We asked, what is appropriate around downtown to go up a little, go up a moderate amount, or go up a lot? And the majority of people said around downtown is an appropriate place to go up a lot. I think that is also reflective of some of the development activity that we've seen happen in and around the downtown over the last couple of years. So I do think the plan as part of that is going to have to at least point to some of the questions that we're going to have to face with that. Specifically, when we talk about potentially expanding the footprint of downtown, our downtown, part of the reason our downtown is successful because of an elevated investment in infrastructure and that happens with that. When we start trying to replicate that across the city without the benefit of other financing mechanisms such as TIF, it becomes really challenging. It becomes really challenging to provide the maintenance, investment, and capital improvements and wide sidewalks everywhere across the city. That we will have to look at that. That it's ultimately going to be obviously a policy decision that's going to be occurring at this table. But I think it has a lot to do with things like what you were talking about with the accessory commercial unit. A lot of the goals and policies that we've talked about as a city is a little bit of localization, 15 and 20-minute neighborhoods, providing mixed uses in neighborhoods. Part of this plan might be reconciling the role of downtown in the community, and with that, maybe that sustains those infrastructure puzzles that we have to solve, or maybe they're not as extreme if the downtown role evolves over time. So I do think the plan needs to address it. I can't sit here and tell you what geographies should or shouldn't be included yet, but if we are talking about expanding the density of it, I think we need to talk about the DDA as a mechanism to help support the success of it.
It's come up before when we were supposed to reimagine Washtenaw, right? That was one of the ideas, is to levy a TIF along that corridor. I know, you look so excited.
No, it just has implications to everything, right?
Yes.
But I think that's a question that we need to look at. You can't expand that pattern of development without the infrastructure. And Stacy talked about that. I want to be clear, when we're talking about this, there are other public infrastructure investments that we're going to have to be reconciling with the city. Mm-hmm. We have capacity in some places and we have challenge capacities in other places. So we are approaching it from a land use policy provision, but at the same time, in addition to financing mechanisms, there's going to be some questions maybe about how we support that. What's the phasing? What's the geography? So there's a lot of ifs, but obviously this is an important first step to lay out the vision.
Yeah, that's a super diplomatic way of saying it's up to politicians. I appreciate it.
It's politicians and
Yes.
expenditures. We have a lot of needs now, and so as we add needs to those, we're just going to have to figure out how we address them.
So speaking of politicians, if I can ask, Reimagine Washtenaw was supposed to be a partnership with our neighbors, and also it was a discussion that we've had with the state, right? So in speaking about future potential partners, the schools. I was up north this weekend, and I noticed how Traverse City has a new consortium that's their public schools, their teachers union, private schools, art schools, the state has come together, and their Office of Rural Prosperity has come together to figure out housing for teachers next on school property. We are school adjacent, I understand that, but if this is truly comprehensive, are we having discussions with our school partners?
Yeah, I can say not so much to the comprehensive plan. The school district obviously has a lot that they're working with right now, but we have had some of those conversations in the past. Generally, part of this comprehensive plan, we are thinking about what the role of public lands are. I think that's appropriate. This body has sort of put your foot into that door with repurposing downtown parking lots for affordable housing. I think it's appropriate for us to look at that citywide. We have a lot of public land assets, and maybe they're all being used in the best way now. Maybe they're not all being used in the best way now. There's a lot of political decisions that happen to that. That could be schools, it could be city. So we do anticipate making some, looking at the role of public land. If you were at any of our workshops, not included in this, but we have a lot of tax exempt land, and there's a lot of things that you and the community would like to achieve. And so we frankly have to be mindful of that balance. So not specific conversations now, to be clear, but definitely think that there is a component of this plan that will make recommendations about how we should be thinking about public land assets broadly.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think we have conversations with our colleagues as much as we can. And as parents, many of us are parents, it's something that we're mindful of. And when we speak to housing, we often use teachers and nurses as examples. So if the university is also part of that public land evaluation in math, given that we're already talking about light rail as if it's not a Simpsons episode, then it would be great if we could talk about housing for healthcare workers.
And I just want to be honest too. We have a lot of data that we're relying on and making projections and scenarios. The university has a lot of growth ahead of it, so that's going to probably change some of those impacts. Road networks, investment, you name it. So we are doing our best. Climate migration. When we're looking at these scenarios, should those be increased by 50%? Twice. So there's a lot of challenges, and but even just starting with some of the data that we have now, it's been really interesting to see where they could go and how we support them.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Ackman.
I appreciate the point about, allowing for 2 and 4 unit housing developments in our neighborhoods. Isn't something that would necessarily happen super dramatically and quickly, but I think, I'm sure that you all are also discussing minimum lot sizes and the other things that kind of constrain the ability to build ADUs at this point, or even a second house on a lot that's quite large. I was kind of interested to see the point about concerns about increased traffic congestion. I'm not surprised that residents brought it up because we often hear that come up as a concern. But I guess I'm curious about the team's take on that because from my perspective, we're a job center. As was highlighted in the presentation, the idea is to be able to house at least half of the people who are commuting into the city every day. So to me, I mean, they're already on our roads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Stacy, I'll let Stacy add anything to this if desired, but just speaking for experience, we're kind of in this situation because our economic potential drives that challenge now as more development happens, be it residential, as the university grows. I think it is realistic that if history follows, that growth has historically happened at a faster rate than housing. So granted, part of these scenarios are trying to catch up with that and balance that, but I think it's just recognizing when you look at the university growing, being honest that like, say we are able to every year meet whatever target to get to that, it's not going to solve congestion immediately.
Right, but I think the way that it was characterized on the slide is that might be a downside of upzoning and allowing more density.
Yeah, Stacy,
Yeah.
you and I talked about that. You want to
Yeah.
add?
Yes, I think your point is spot on and what we try to explain, but the idea, I think, is coming from a place of not just the commuters, I think there is an understanding that ideally this will help alleviate some of the commuter traffic, but there is a sense that within the city, beyond commuting to work, there will be an increase of people going to all sorts of things in the city then, right? Just more residents driving to whatever, the park, the shopping center, because there is a lag between, adding, like say, adding a residential multifamily building and, the street infrastructure isn't set up yet, for you to be able to bike everywhere, or the bus system isn't frequent enough for you to realistically hop on a bus. So you're still driving. So I think there is that little bit of that sentiment that, yes, we understand the long-term goal is to reduce the vehicle miles traveled, which it would do. But the lived reality is, I think, in people's minds that, there's still places in Ann Arbor where you have to drive, and there will be more people driving there. But there'll be shorter, distances, but that there's a sense that may contribute to some level of traffic, but it might be different. The patterns of congestion might be different.
And I think, let's not bury the lead. A housing unit in the city, we open up that opportunity. It's sort of like we were talking about 2 to 4 units. It's not a mandate that people are going to switch their mode of transportation, but we're opening up that opportunity much more than that same University of Michigan employee living 20 or 30 miles away. So I think, as Stacy said, the important thing is that does housing units in the city does drive that goal, but it's also going to bring more people who are going to live their lives. And so I don't know, maybe it's just a fear on my part that I don't want to sit here and profess to you that if we can build 40,000 units, there will no longer be traffic jams on Washtenaw Avenue. But that's where it's coming from.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's short term. I think there's that idea that there will be a short term pain, before you reach that critical mass.
Thanks. I've got a couple of questions myself. First, on the, obviously throughout, we're seeing this theme of affordability, and it's not surprising, I think, to anyone at this table. But I also recognize through my own conversations with constituents that affordability means different things to everybody. And so as you're having these conversations and focus groups, are you defining affordable for folks, or are you kind of allowing that to exist in kind of each individual person's?
The latter. I mean, we were actually taking a step further, asking people, what does it mean to you? And you're absolutely right. It means a variety of things. I tend to, I'll be honest, whenever I see it, I tend to gravitate towards capital A affordable housing units that I know have some regulatory framework that guarantee their affordability. But it does mean a lot of things to each other, to a lot of different people. And I think those scenarios impact both of those. It's a supply and demand model. It's opening up more opportunities for dedicated units when we have the opportunity. So definitely the latter. It's a good question, like whether or not it's important for this plan to sort of put a stake in the ground and say that, but we have so much to accomplish probably on both fronts that I think it's okay to let both coexist.
Okay, thanks. Second, on the conversation around the 2 to 4 units in single-family zoned areas, I guess I wonder, one of the challenges that, as staff knows, we're hearing about in one of the near-campus neighborhoods in Ward 3 right now. Near-campus neighborhoods function a little bit differently than neighborhoods a little further out into the city. And so the transition away from a traditional single-family home may happen a little bit more quickly in a near-campus neighborhood because there's more economic incentive for that change to happen.
And that's reflected in our zoning, too.
And I wonder, though, one of the things that we're seeing is, I think when a lot of us think about a duplex, you're thinking about kind of like a two-family living situation. And in some of those near-campus neighborhoods, you're seeing where you may have 2 units, but really there are 10 plus students living in a single unit because they're built to have really kind of subunits within a unit. And are we thinking at all differently about kind of campus area versus other parts of the city, or are we thinking about it kind of holistically throughout?
I would say holistically so far. But one of the things that you're describing is very much an outcome of some of the regulations that we've put in place. We have restricted a lot of our housing opportunities and added a lot of regulations, which drives a lot of some of that conversion that you're talking about. Things like historic homes being sort of tried to maximize to 6-bedroom units because we don't provide a lot of flexibility for that. So to date, we haven't talked much about differentiating that from a neighborhood to neighborhood perspective, but I think some of that, frankly, will also come out of the context of sort of that low, moderate, high potential for development growth. Stacy talked about it, but one of your directions to us was also to try and reduce the number of zoning districts to make it easier to understand, more flexible. And so I think that'll probably be a part of that is, I don't know how low we'll get. I don't know if we'll get back to our original 4 from, 1923. Yeah, it's a good question. We can look at it. We have not differentiated yet, but that's something we can consider as we're putting forth that framework.
Thanks.
I mean, I think the scale issues might be very similar, but I see what you mean. The proximity might be different.
And then I think the last thing I had was really just more of a comment, and really appreciated kind of seeing in a few places really kind of this emphasis on placemaking as well, and a sense of place, and seeing things like a lively riverfront and downtown and things like that I think are really important. And I think from my perspective, one of the things that I think a lot of residents who are maybe a little hesitant with a lot of the changes that are happening around the city comes from a feeling of loss of place. And so I think it's really important for us to continue centering that in our conversations as we think about the future of our city and what, a lively downtown and a place where people want to spend their time looks like. And so, I get excited about, when we have conversations about, Main Street and how much of a success that has been when it's closed on weekends, and how we can make that, more permanent and have these places for people to be and really celebrate our city. And so thanks for that focus in there as well. Are there other questions? Councilmember Song.
Just one last question about the ADUs, the barriers to building the ADUs. Does financing come up? Is there some way that we can talk about how, or guide folks through how financing can look like and what partners they can look into? Yeah,
I presume financing. I don't have that direct conversation with a lot of applicants, but I would presume that is a big piece of it. Recently, we unfortunately we weren't successful, but one of the components of a recent grant application we made was also the notion of maybe pre-designing ADUs. I think it'd be really fantastic to be able to have a downloadable plan to take away a little bit of that upfront design cost from folks. But I think financing is probably part of it. Probably part of it's just education, understanding what the tax implications might be or might not be. But it's also just really not it's very difficult and costly to build right now. So I would say that probably just financing and costs are probably the biggest barriers right now. I don't think it's the zoning regulation. I don't think. We've had some success. We could always look to open that up further. I'm sure that there's some levers, but it's probably financing primarily, but I'm speculating that maybe you've had some more conversations with neighbors about it than I have.
I think the widows on my own block they're never, they've been there, they are never leaving.
Yeah.
I'm never leaving. I have a half pipe in my backyard.
You're-
So I get
you're
it,
stuck.
right? I don't have room from ADU, even if I wanted one. But I bring that up because, I mean, when we changed ADU or updated the ADU zoning, one of the things I had really pushed for was the vote for the not requiring homeowner occupancy, right? And that was just based off of the AARP's advice on ADUs. So I don't know if folks aren't reading the AARP policy documents that are out there. I really recommend it. There are a lot of, it's light reading, it's excellent. But, is there any way that in our conversations with the community, we can actually have resources for folks to follow up on
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably like financing, like designs. There is more I'm sure we could do to advocate on the building side of it and education side. Honestly, most of my work has been on the regulatory side.
Okay.
I do want to make sure it's just clear for everybody that ownership is not currently required.
Right.
I know, I think there are communities that have had more success with ADUs, obviously, than we have. Most of them do get involved in the financing side, whether it's subsidizing if they're kept affordable or just general financing partnerships with banks. We haven't got there, but we certainly could. And that might be a conversation not only for ADUs, but for 2 to 4 units in residential areas.
Yeah, I'd hate for it to sit within these chambers and not actually see it in community, because I know the Michigan Municipal League actually had a pattern book, right, on
Homes.
homes.
Yeah.
That they had published, I think, 2 years ago, and an update this year. So conversations are out there, at least on the urban planning geeky world, but actually in the hands of neighbors, that's quite a leap.
And the comprehensive plan, I would say, has been helpful to bridge that. We've had a lot of education, a lot of conversations. I think that 75% is somewhat indicative of maybe there's just more people nerding out on planning stuff than there historically has been.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cornell, and unless somebody has something pressing, we'll probably leave it with her so we can get to our last presentation.
Yes, I think I just want to clarify that what my assumption is actually correct, is that this is piggybacking off of Councilmember Ackman's question about increased traffic and vehicle traffic. But my assumption is that part of the recommendations that come back will consider things like ACU and really building up our transit corridors and whatnot to sort of match the direction from the community around sustainability as being a core value with also our density goals. Is that did I interpret that correctly?
100%.
Okay.
Just as an example, when we're talking about residential zones, that's something we're talking about as a team too, that we've already had a lot of community conversation about integrating neighborhood-based businesses. In order to do that is allowing commercial uses in residential zoning districts. So absolutely, all of those things are definitely part of what we're looking at.
I'm so excited about that. And I think the other thing that I'm assuming as well is that from an equity lens, we're also considering the capital A, affordable housing piece, as part of our comprehensive plan updates so that it is more geographically dispersed throughout the city, so that we are allowing access to other parts of the city for our affordable housing tenants.
Yes, and I would honestly say that's a great opportunity in connection with publicly owned land. It gives us a lot of agencies to decide the geography about and how we want to program land.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Thank you, Ms. Chen, for joining us. Appreciate this conversation. Mr. Leonard, are you leading off the next one as well?
I am.
All right, then we will move on to our development review updates.
if I can find it. Jackie, do you know where Marcus hides these? Yeah. Yeah, I could probably just pull it up from the agenda. See if other one's open. No. Here, let me just, I can pull it up maybe off the agenda.
Is it a PDF? There's a PDF.
Let's do this. It's not going to be nearly this exciting. We'll go with it. Okay, sorry about that. We just talked a lot about the comprehensive plan. There's going to be a lot of recommendations that come out of that, but we haven't been standing still about the development review process. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to just share what's been happening over the last several years to make sure you know that we're not waiting on the comprehensive plan because there's a lot of things are going to go into meeting these goals, not only the policies, of course, but also the process that we can facilitate and help to get as much done as possible. So first off, obviously, I'm focusing on a lot of the work that the planning services team is doing, but we do it with a lot of collaboration through a lot of departments across the city. But one of the things that a couple of the customer-facing improvements that we've made recently has been to implement a concept meeting request form. This has been really helpful for us to sort of right-size the response to petitioners and property owners about what they're looking for. Before, we were sort of mining emails and phone calls with people constantly wanting to set up meetings to talk about concepts. This is allowing us to be, frankly, a lot more responsive because we can get quick responses out to people who only have a quick question, and then spend the time on those that are really wanting to explore a larger concept or questions about a more complex development proposal. So that's been really helpful. We just published our new fee sheet to add a lot more transparency. I can't say that it reduced the fees, but it provides a lot more transparency about what you're paying for when you make those applications. And we're improving a lot of guides, such as checklists, to help petitioners. We work with both, I would say, more inexperienced with our system and experienced. And people still, we still miss items and we still have some breakdowns in communication. So we're doing all we can to help people successfully get to both in the door to start the review process and, of course, to the culmination via a decision as quickly as possible. The online stream system, it's been active since 2022, and again, this has a lot of benefits across the organization for a lot of different disciplines, but for the development review process, we're spending a lot of time to make sure, of course, that it's accurate for consistency with both petitioners and the public. We've created a public-facing development tracker. This was a sort of a petitions under review mechanism that fell out of our previous system due to the system becoming outdated, so we've been able to resurrect that. People can see what's happening in different geographies of the city, click on it, and find out the status of it. Digital online plan submittal and payment, it seems like routine at this point, but it was only in 2022 that you could actually pay for an application with a credit card on the city's website. Before that, you're bringing in a check. We have people who are allocating that check and depositing it to different accounts. So that's been a huge improvement, not only for the payment, but also the online submittal. We're completely paperless now, so that's been great for sharing information. We've established project dashboards, or PROJ files. Maybe you've seen them when you're hunting around or working with your constituents to answer a question about a proposal. These are basically a big bucket that all of the various applications related to that development are connected to. So it's a great way for people to understand everything from the site plan to building permits associated with that project. That's been very helpful also for us to be communicating amongst ourselves and other departments to make sure that we're connecting things appropriately. And we're not done. Stream is going to be an ongoing process like any system, and we're continuing to make updates to make our applications more user-friendly, make sure we're focusing on the information we need, not on the information we don't need, to make sure that it's as easy and pain-free as possible for people. Behind the scenes, in our department, we, largely thanks to the fantastic Deputy Planning Manager, Hank Kelly, we've greatly improved our internal project tracking system. That's had such success that other departments are starting to sort of look over our shoulder at that to get information on that system. And just simple things. We've started converting some of our sort of cross-department meetings as placeholders so that we can get people in for pre-submission meetings, petitioners in more quickly. Sometimes it can be challenging to get a broad scheduling of different people across the organization. We're sort of building in these calendar holds, which has been really helpful to move those projects along more quickly. So those are just a few of the sort of process, what I would say, process improvements, but we're also making regulatory changes. And so I just want to highlight some changes that we've made over the last several years to the Unified Development Code. You're going to see these coded in a similar green, yellow, and red that Dr. Stoltz indicated previously during her presentation. I just want to just be clear, these are sort of my take on how I think that they have either made the development process easier neighbor neutral or more difficult in the city. Here in 2019, we allowed food trucks, allowed front porches to extend into required front setbacks. Those two were based on a lot of inquiries we were getting. We were getting tons of questions, and so we responded. This is something that the community was expressing they wanted, and so we made the changes. Allowing the integration of restaurants and bars and office developments. This is just another evolution of the city becoming more mixed-use friendly. Those are great amenities to have in a large office building, a cafe or a restaurant, and so a great addition. In 2019, though, we also modified our premiums. Prior to that, we weren't getting any capital A affordable housing units as part of our previous premium structure, and so we made some changes. It made it more difficult. It made it more difficult to develop housing downtown. And then we also quickly established the provision of recreational marijuana uses in the city after the state legislation was approved. 2020, we made some changes to our site plan content requirements, again, focusing on checklists that really didn't have any positive or negative impact. It was just hopefully clarifying the information a little bit better. We adopted a new sign ordinance that's content neutral. Before, we had different sign regulations if you were a political sign, if you were a real estate sign, if you were a commercial sign. And so that's all been consolidated into a single sort of physical sign regulation. And we recognize other community goals. We provided height exceptions for solar-mounted roof panels so that buildings that may have been built tight to a previous height limit wanted to put rooftop solar. Let's make sure we're not getting in the way of that. We made that change as well. 2021, obviously from the colors at least, I would say a mixed result. We had some positive. We provided the clear benefit that if you are donating land to the city for parks or right-of-way, you're not penalized in your floor area ratio calculation. We relaxed some of the standard about accessory dwelling units. We created the TC1 zoning district, and we greatly expanded the flexibility of home-based businesses from what it was previously. But I think that there were some ordinance amendments that made things more difficult or more costly. We added the requirement of EV parking spaces as a percentage of the vehicular parking spaces you're providing. I think Dr. Stoltz referenced that, and there's sort of like the ADUs, it's still an opportunity for us to find ways to mitigate that, but it does add a cost to development. We added short-term regulations to the city, which didn't exist prior, and we increased the requirements for outdoor lighting regulation. We specified specific color, temperature, shielding that we didn't do before. So just complicating a relatively small aspect of development, but making it more complex for compliance than it was previously. 2022, some big swings. We changed the site plan approval authority for a lot of projects from you to the Planning Commission, and some from the Planning Commission to me. We changed the minimum threshold that requires a site plan at all from 2 units to 4 units. We started kicking off our zoning of TC1 for 2 of the corridors, and we eliminated minimum vehicular parking regulations for all uses in all zoning districts across the city. R2A is sort of, we made changes to the R2A. That's right in line with some of the conversations we were just having. We reduced the lot size, rear setback, lot width requirements, and that converted about the majority, around 75–80% of lots as non-conforming to conforming to actually allow duplexes to be built in that duplex zone. So a lot of momentum in that year. And then in 2023, TC1, we're going to continue to tweak it. I want to be honest, you're going to see more. It's a new district, and we're going to learn from it, and that's to be expected. We made some changes to provide some more flexibility for uses. We made some changes to allow open space in the front to accommodate future multimodal, depending on what the public right-of-way dimensions are there. And going back to that 2019 premiums, we went back on that regulation. We eliminated premiums, which has really allowed more housing development to be occurring, particularly in our downtown core. And then this year, we've got 1 TC1 rezoning completed. You've had 1 reading of another one. We have made some minor changes, reducing the where conflicting land use buffers have to happen between what planning staff would assert as very similar uses. Established a new use to provide some more flexibility of office districts, and specifically, again, trying to provide more flexibility for our A20 goals, allowing for front yard solar panels to be installed where that was prohibited explicitly previously. On the horizon, you probably recall you've given us some homework through a couple of resolutions. Those are in the drafting stage. Those will get moving here shortly. Obviously, the recommendations from the comprehensive plan, and I just want to acknowledge a lot of these changes that happened over these last couple of years that I just highlighted. It's an ongoing process. Zoning's not static. When we, as staff, see opportunities for improvement, or we see an opportunity to simplify or clarify, you'll see that thread of recommendations as well. So there will be a lot coming out of the comprehensive plan, a lot coming out of your direction, but those won't be the only sources of ordinance amendments. So not waiting for the comprehensive plan to initiate some of that work. I just wanted to give you a snapshot that we have, I think, made a lot of progress over the last couple of years, and happy to answer any questions that you have about any of that work.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. We have about 10 minutes for questions or comments from council. Anybody?
You don't have to have any.
Councilmember Ackman?
I just have a quick question so I can kind of understand your evaluation of the colors. Was the red meaning like where we're being more restrictive and the green was where we're being more permissive?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Seeing no other questions, thank you, Mr. Lynn. Mr. Dahon?
Thank you. I think we might have some public comment, but a couple of things just to sort of wrap things up, some things that we didn't say explicitly that we need to be explicit about. Vertical density in a concentrated way has impact on sewer capacity. And as we see growth happen, we have got to do our homework around that. That came front and center with the university housing that's going on right now. They had to spend 8 figures in order to deal with capacity because the infrastructure is old and we can't always carry the load of highly concentrated construction. The other part that we didn't touch on in terms of the congestion that Councilmember Ackman asked about, if you have accelerated construction in a dense city like ours, that in and of itself is going to create congestion in the short term because you're going to limit your lane size while it's happening. So we're glad to have the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I don't know when our next work session will be, but we'll give you some notice. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dahoney. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. Speakers will have up to 3 minutes to address council with only one person speaking at a time. For those speaking via Zoom, the city clerk will notify you when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time has expired. If anyone in the room would like to address council, please come on up and introduce yourself.
Good evening. I'm Kathy. I'd like to congratulate Missy and Jackie on some of the wonderful things that they are doing for our community. I talked to Missy a while ago and I said, Missy, do you think we could just clone you and have you work on transportation? But she didn't agree. So people ask, why am I here time after time after time? Don't you get tired of this? And I can't live with myself. I would be complicit if I did not speak out. And one of the issues is that council is beyond negligent. They're not just negligent. And negligent is a failing to take proper care in doing something. Directors have been negligent in the performance of their duties. This council just cherry picks the fun things, and that's great, and you can have a good time. But As most of you have heard, the official crash data for 2023, worst year for Ann Arbor pedestrian crashes since 2014. So replace the word congestion with crash. It might be short-lived, except for the people who don't make it through, or like my friend who will be permanently injured from a crash. I just don't know what to do other than say that I have tickets on A2 Fix-It for the King School crosswalks. I'll send an email with new photos. I have talked to the mayor twice. I have talked to many of you, and I've talked to Milton. My only recourse right now is to file a complaint with Laura. And the problem with filing a complaint is that I have to give names of licensed engineers. I don't want to do it. It's not the engineers that are at fault. It is this council for not providing the resources and prioritizing pedestrian safety. So if someone has another idea, let me know, but I don't think so. So I will end on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers?
Good evening, my name's Evan. I was actually going to speak on a different topic tonight, but we don't have very many council members here. So listening at what council and what the presentations were, which I appreciated hearing, and living in the very center of downtown, and having lived in the center of cities like New York and London, I see significant differences in the role of density in a city like Ann Arbor than I do in a city like London or New York. Here we need concentrated density because of the University of Michigan campus. It's a major, not just national, but also an international university. It characterizes a lot of the character of the city itself. And this really isn't a normal situation for a small city downtown like Ann Arbor, and we are a small city. I look at the statistics for the population, it says 130,000. You look at the number of students, which is somewhere around 50,000, and you figure we probably got another 20-odd thousand staff and associated services. So half of our city is the University of Michigan. Ann Arbor is cute and it's charming, and I would not characterize New York or London as cute and charming. I would say other things about them. I love the cities, but they're very different places. When I moved back, I had a certain amount of trepidation. Can I really adapt? I knew what the schools were like because I attended the schools here. It was a benefit for the family, for my son to be able to also go to the schools here. So, huge benefits, but I was worried about what it would be like. What I found was it was more livable. When I left after graduating from the University of Michigan, I felt older then than I feel today until I moved to Manhattan, and then I felt like a baby. What I found when I came back is Ann Arbor had grown, and it was no longer just Ann Arbor and just the university. It was the entire county. People were coming in, and things have opened up here that didn't exist when I'd left. And I found that I was immersed in a county, and even to a certain degree a state. I'd gone to places I'd never gone before. But one of the central things I find for living downtown, and I can say a couple points, we can't stop talking about Target opening up on State Street because there's no place to shop. Now, we've got a car. We don't have to pay for parking. Our tenants do. We have an old Queen Anne-style home with a few apartments in it, and we live in it as well. They're the ones with the problem. And they're finding it more and more difficult to pay for parking and get parking, which is a problem for them. And then the big question comes, I would never want to get on a bus to get out to Myers. And this needs to be thought about in planning because we don't have a metro. And how are we going to manage transit between, say, you've got, I think it's a brilliant idea that we're developing
Thank you.
Briarwood. Brilliant. It could become a different downtown, but I have to go in and out on State Street.
Thank you.
What are we going to do about that?
Thanks.
It needs to be consideration.
Do we have any other public commenters in the room? Do we have anyone online who would like to address council?
Mayor Pro Tem, I don't see any callers online.
Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Do we have any communications from council today? Councilmember Song.
We hear a lot about the King School crosswalk. My children went to King School. I ran a walking bus to King School for a number of years with over 20 children. I want to share a response from Liz Margolis, who is the School Safety and District Operations Director at Ann Arbor Public Schools, in response to these questions around the King School crosswalk. AAPS has always stated that the walkways are not on school district property, so we do not maintain them. I also recall that who actually owns the walkways is unclear, as they are not included as city property either. So what we've been talking about has been private parcels, a walkway that cut through in the side of the school that has been casually used by a number of students for years. I've used it when I was late to drop my child off at school. I'm glad that the city is being creative and responding to what it can, but the idea that somehow we are criminally responsible and that that former council member wants to find a way to revoke a staff's license, that's not collaboration, that's a threat. And if you think there's criminal behavior here, then you need to look into the county prosecutor's office and maybe the state attorney general and pursue it in that route.
Thank you. Are there any other council comments? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adjourn? Councilmember Cornell, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. All those in favor? We are adjourned.